So, Tommy, our £500 Flash Fiction Competition is now in full swing.
It is. 350 words on the theme of festive. And we've already had quite a few entries in, haven't we?
I've been enjoying reading them.
Yeah, me too.
They're all very different as well, like last time.
So get writing, and your 350-word masterpiece
Could win you £500, and the closing date is
Friday, December the 13th at midday UK time. You'll find all the details you need on our blog at failingwriterspodcast.com.
in association with the lovely people at Scrivener.
Aren't they lovely?
They are lovely.
Here is a little advert for them. So, if Scrivener was a dog, what kind of dog would it be?
Ooh, I reckon it'd be one of those really agile ones that does the obstacle course at Crufts really quickly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
It would. What if it was a type of cheese?
Well, it wouldn't be a type of cheese. It would be a cheese board, wouldn't it? It'd be a bit of everything. Does it all well.
Yeah. What if Scrivener wore, actually, I think that really covers it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Scrivener is like a cross between a best-in-show dog and a lovely cheese board.
Now, you see, I am surprised, nay, shocked, that Scrivener's marketing team haven't used that before. I mean,
No,
it just seems...
they've missed a trick there, haven't they?
It's just so obvious, isn't it? The classic dog cheese analogy.
I mean, I bet they're glad that we're doing some adverts for them.
I bet they bloody are.
Yeah.
I bet they are. Yeah.
Get Scrivener, your cheese dog of superlative writing software, at literatureandlatte.com.
Use the code FAILING for 20% off. I mean, genius is overused, isn't it? But I think we are. Aren't we? So anyway, I would suggest if you haven't started writing your entry yet, you probably need to take a good, long, hard look at your life choice.
Yeah, go away, have a good long think.
Yeah, you do that. Anyway, on with the actual episode. I mean, we've got an entire generation of our future to save, so, yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Failing Writers podcast. Today we bring you an episode made specially for one person. Oh, is that person me? I wonder if it's me, some of you perhaps are wondering. Well, no. Statistically speaking, it's almost certainly not you. This episode is for Bridget Phillipson, Secretary of State for Education in the UK. That's not to say you're not allowed to listen if you're not Bridget, though. In fact, we strongly implore as many people to listen as possible. The stuff we're discussing is of the utmost importance for the future readers and writers of Great Britain and the rest of the world. So settle down, everyone, eyes to the front, and pay attention. Here's an open letter from the Failing Writers.
Dear Bridget Phillipson, Secretary of State for Education.
Wait, John, can I just stop you there for a sec? Just before we get started, because that already sounds quite political and, dare I say,
What?
dry, I guess. What I'm asking is, this isn't going to be not going to be a boring episode, is it? This?
No, Tom.
Oh, good. Right, great.
It's actually 2 episodes.
Oh, bloody hell. Right.
Come on, Tom. We don't do boring episodes. You know this. Have some faith. It'll be a cracker. We're going to be hearing amazing young writers' work, some of which will blow your socks off. We'll be getting an insight into how to encourage the next generation of readers and writers, might even inspire the current generation.
Good. All right.
And later, we might find out if the Secretary of State for Education actually replies to the letter we're about to write to her. But, you know, sometimes you've got to dig deep, Tom. You've got to do the stuff that matters. You've got to reach out. You've got to change the world.
All right, yeah, I'm in.
So, back to the open letter. Dear Bridget Phillipson.
Secretary of State for Education.
I know you're pretty new to the job, and we don't want to be a nuisance or anything, but just in case you hadn't clocked it, we just wanted to draw your attention for a moment to the subject of English, in which you've probably noticed there's currently a crisis, quietly but spectacularly exploding.
Fewer pupils than ever are choosing to study English at A-level. Something like 30% down in the last 7 years.
That is a lot. Also, university English courses are being shut down left, right and centre. And a recent survey revealed the number of young people who enjoy writing in their own time has fallen off a cliff, almost halving in the last 15 years.
There's also been a sharp drop in the number of children reading every day.
Now, we appreciate the reasons for this are various and complex, but we reckon it would be in everyone's best interests to try and prevent these trends continuing at the speed they are.
And so, in our attempt to be helpful, we at the Failing Writers podcast will put our heads together with some amazing English provision experts to hopefully give you a head start on reviving this glorious and transformative school subject.
Hey, look what happens when you focus. Yeah. Hey, Tom, I think that's pretty nice opener for our letter.
Yeah, gets the main points across, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and
hopefully.
The urgency of it. Also, I was reading the other day that this isn't just a problem in the UK either.
Right.
There are very similar trends and studies in the US and the rest of Europe that say the same kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me. Right, put your cape on, Tommy. Let's sort this out. This is a job for the Failing Writers.
Can't decide if our podcast name is a hindrance or foreboding omen on this one.
Yeah, it could go either way.
And not wanting to pour cold water on your quest.
Our quest, Tom.
Okay,
Our
quest. To solve the impending national literacy crisis single-handedly. Is that our job?
It's everyone's job, Tom. It's a national emergency.
Is it?
Yes, it is. And I reckon that even if we help just a little tiny, weeny little bit, we'll be able to lie in bed at night knowing that we, you and me, Tom, we've saved English.
Okay.
So, first up, we should go and have a chat with some people and find out more.
Like some people who actually know what they're talking about.
Precisely.
Good plan.
So, yeah, where should we start?
Well, I have a little idea about that, John.
Oh, yeah? Let's have it.
Doesn't your sister-in-law just happen to be like an amazing super-duper English provision expert person who goes into schools and helps teachers inspire their pupils to write? Like, amazing prose and poems and things, and just generally get kids to fall in love with English?
That is actually a brilliant idea, Tom. Well, let's blummin' do it. Let's go and talk to the amazing Leah Crawford. Tell us first just a bit about what you actually do.
It sort of takes a bit of history if that's not too boring. So I've taught little ones, I've taught Montessori and I've taught some junior school, but then became a teacher. My teacher training was secondary, so I was a 11 to 18 teacher, became English subject leader. Then I went independent, which is 8 years or so ago. So I work with Let's Think in English. I work with Bob Cox and the team Opening Doors, but I do my own stuff as well.
Fantastic.
So it's kind of presenting, running courses, writing, keynotes, all that stuff.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about Opening Doors and Let's Think and the sort of various guises that you work under. Are we talking a sort of a methodology to kind of help get the most out of English lessons?
Yeah. Sadly, probably a bit left field and a bit niche and shouldn't be.
Right.
We'd love to be mainstream, but we kind of admit to be a really good teacher, it's hard. And to be a really good teacher of English, you should know and understand a lot about text and read a lot of texts and go into the richness of it. So common denominators across those two things is like rich literature, or rich, even if they're non-fictional texts as well. They're like beautifully written. They've got voice, they've got viewpoint, they talk to you. It's text that make you think and feel. How do you do that? So that's probably really core. The other bit, I suppose, has got Lev Vygotsky at its core, if we're not getting too theoretical there.
Yeah, you've just completely lost us both.
So he was researching and teaching in Bolshevik Russia, a massive socialist, taught mainly children who were really struggling, and everyone else had almost decided we can't do anything with them. But he knew if you work with children's minds through their language, then actually, we don't know a child's potential. It's never got a ceiling on it. So it's the absolute centrality of dialogue in the classroom to wake up children's minds. And it's like, if you think language and talk are like the two DNA strands of learning, you're not just translating ideas into language. As you get them out in language, you're almost realising what it is that you think. And then other people give you more words to understand that and might go that little bit further and that bit more abstract. And then, so that language then goes back into the thinking and the thinking becomes more developed.
Yeah. Spirals.
Absolutely starts to spiral if you've got that kind of more knowledgeable other with whom to interact, who's really unselfish and wants to support and tease that greater understanding out. And deeper, more kind of confident use of language. So it's like your general language capability is developing along with your thought. Yeah.
You're right. That does sound really hard. That sounds like hard work.
Just think about it, John, and put it into language. You'll probably understand it then. That's all you have to do.
You see, I say that and people go, and then you do a bit of teaching and you go, oh, I get it.
Yeah,
It is what a lot of teachers do anyway, but it's, I suppose everybody I really work with closely believes like teachers should have a theory. We're a profession. We should start from a theoretical base, but you're constantly translating that into, so what does that look like? So what move do I next make in the classroom? And actually inoculates you against crap. And people just chuck, new areas in education. Just do this. Just these 5 things. Well,
But we are talking about kids here, Leah, because, what's wrong with a bit of Biff and Chip?
What do you think?
Do not ask my opinions on Biff, Chip and Kipper.
Oh, you see, that's a good teacher. I can infer your opinion.
You picked up on that.
I did.
Very perceptive. Very perceptive.
Yes. I mean, that's learning to read, but that's just learning to lift the shapes off the page. There's a bit of that that's necessary, but my kids also were bored to tears with their phonically decodable books. But why would you want to struggle through phonics? Why do you really want to become a reader? Is never because I want to read Biff and Chip.
So if you were to strip everything down, that's kind of the underlying theory behind it. That sounds like that's not just about English, that's just about teaching generally.
They forgot to keep it is, yes, absolutely. But then, so the Englishy common denominator is always the potential for learning is in the text. And that's why not Biff, Chip and Kipper. The only potential in that is, can I lift words off the page? So there's potential in the text to take my thinking on, to take my knowledge on, but increasingly to take my style choices on. What's the impact I want to have on my reader? What's the big effect I want my text to have? And then, if I want to do that, what kind of choices have I got as a writer to do that? And rather than that coming from a government website, or like a list of features that we've become very much about, all of these grammar features, if you include all of those, your writing is good. It's like, no, it's not. So I was just in a webinar yesterday with a load of teachers and we were looking at the Riddles in the Dark chapter of The Hobbit and the introduction of Gollum. Yeah, as a character. He's the best character in the book. So it's like just how genius is Tolkien. And he starts out, he's just paddling slowly, looking with his pale lamp-like eyes, paddling slowly across the lake. We just looked at those verbs and going, he's just looking, he's paddling. They're quite sort of gentle, and even the adverbs there were just with his pale-like eyes, slowly. And then eventually, he'd spotted blind fish, which he would grab and throttle from behind. You go, whoa. Okay, actually, year 5, just look at that string of verbs there. Yeah, it's not what verbs are Gollumy. It's like, look, you've been taken on this breadcrumb trail that he's quite lonely, quite gentle, quite slow, and then suddenly sinister and terrifying, but always fascinating. So we go, right, okay, you are going to be Gollumy. You're going to continue this passage. Gollum has just spotted Bilbo. What is he going to do next? Because now we know how to write in a Gollumy way, yeah?
That's all very exciting. And then you're kind of nodding along and thinking, yes, that probably is slightly better than Biff, Chip and Kipper. I think Tolkien, in the end, when all's said and done, may come out on top in the literary stakes between him and whichever miscreant wrote Biff, Chip and Kipper. But what's the barrier for that passion and understanding and opening that door? What's the barrier that you keep coming up against or that you have to constantly work against in the teaching profession? Is it just the amount of work they've got to do as teachers, or there's not or they just hate kids so they don't really want to do it anymore? Or what's stopping this just being the norm?
Absolutely brilliant question. That is the killer question. There's a variety of things going on there. So one can be primary generalist teachers who are teaching like 12 subjects.
Yeah.
Yeah, and madly busy.
Yeah.
Actually, they teach English every day, probably for about an hour and a half every day. So it sort of should be the core of what they do. So on top of that, I've got to teach English. I want to teach it well. I can be a bit distracted, but they're distracted by the current curriculum, which is so overstuffed with content, and particularly kind of spelling and grammar. If you taught all the spelling and grammar up to 11, it's like you wouldn't need anything more in secondary school. It's clearly, it's really quite badly put together, in my opinion. So they're trying to rock through loads of content. It's like, so I haven't got time to read stuff. I just need some schemes of work on text. And then there's that text is quite hard for me to read and my kids will never read it.
Yeah.
So there is that barrier.
In a way, it's trusting that kids will get it, isn't it?
I mean, it comes from a really good place of teachers going, I don't want to fail them.
Yeah, of course.
I should cover the curriculum. This is what I'm here for. So it very, very rarely comes from, and I can't be bothered. It's I don't think this can work. I don't think we've all got time for it. But equally, if I read the whole of Riddles in the Dark, start to finish, boom, and then went, right, let's write our own Gollum-y type episode or scene, that's too much. That's cognitive overload. So a really key USP to Opening Doors and to Let's Think is the slow reveal of a text, which is that very Vygotsky, of just look at a little sliver, and then we're going to think and talk hard, and there's going to be some dialogue about, what have we learned about Gollum so far? What are we thinking about him? What was it in the text that made you think that? Let's really look at the language. Okay, now reveal a bit more. I don't know, he's throttled the fish from behind. Okay, have we changed our minds? Okay, what was it? What was the details that made you change our mind about? Yeah, so you build that in a way that is the right kind of cognitive pitch for the kids. And if what we do is if you teach teachers in that way and go, look how I made that possible for you, find a rich text, you can do that. It takes a professional to go, I'm going to set the little breadcrumb trail. Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of writing specifically, this is going to sound like a stupid question, but how important do you think it is to learn to write well? Because let's be honest, we've got ChatGPT now. So why should students study something that a computer can do? Why does it actually matter?
So we could go back to your Andy Stanton episode, couldn't we? They still haven't learned to write well, is number one. And I don't think they're ever going to... You can rattle something off. You can rattle off a complaint letter or something. I don't think it's ever going to write literature. But there's also... It's about the thinking process and what you're learning about language and what you're learning about the world through the process. So it isn't, how many kids are going to leave and become a poet and a novelist? Not many. It's not really your goal. But how many do you want to feel like they can, even if what they do in life with their friends, with their siblings in their job is always talk, you still need a control of language. You still need choices in language. So it's more like that cause and effect that you're trying to grow of, you are this being that is a language creator. Actually, it's a kind of art-based subject at core. And we want you to have the confidence to know what's this text, whether it's talk, whether it's a speech, whether it's a presentation, or whether you are writing something for your work or for fun. Think about your goal, think about your intent, and then think about the choices that you can make in relation to that. And that's kind of any art. There's a cause and effect science in the heart of any arts subject. And so really we're trying to wake that up.
Yeah. Do you think we have a general problem in the world of education at the minute that devalues arty-farty subjects? I mean, there's a lot of talk recently about, degrees that aren't, not proper degrees. Yeah. Oh, you're not going to get a job doing that, are you?
Completely. It's almost like it's been deliberate policy. I think it's, again, politicians evil? No, I think they've made some lazy choices that you can make more money if you take on a STEM subject and there's a guaranteed job at the end of it, and creative industries, are not the way to go. It's actually statistically completely wrong.
Really?
Yeah. I went round a whole load of unis. My eldest daughter did an illustration degree. So we went round lots of what were the old art schools, that grew up in post-war 60s and 70s. And actually their employability rate is higher than engineering degrees.
Oh, wow.
And it's because of what I've just talked about. That process is like every week you've got to make something and you've got to stand up in front of your class and you've got to present it and you've got to take the critique. And if you get knocked back, you've got to put it right and go and show it again. So there's that going on. Yeah, there's policy. Oh, God, the ridiculous EBAC that isn't really an English baccalaureate at all, but there was a pressure to put bright kids who were going to get their 9 GCSEs through a certain range of subjects as well, none of which included drama, art, music. And it's a little bit, Tommy, don't get me started on the state of the English lit.
I was feeling that halfway through. Yeah, shouldn't have asked that question.
We've got loads more questions like that, Leah. So you're going to hate answering. I was going to ask, where do you sit on testing? Because this is another that'll be in my bonnet. The fact that kids seem to be tested really, really early on in this country. I don't know whether that's normal these days, like, across Europe or whatever. But are we particularly obsessed with assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our kids are the most tested across the globe.
Because that's another, aside from that being another pressure on teachers That's another reason to, learn more quickly and kind of almost make it less fun while you're doing it.
Yeah, it's like we've got obsessed with efficiency. So like if you do things efficiently, that means it's better and it's good, efficiently and quickly. And actually learning isn't like that. Often it's better if it's slower and it's deeper.
Yeah.
There's that going on. Yeah, there's accountability. Schools use public money, and they should be accountable for outcomes. But that's hard to measure. So what's easy to measure, what's so-called reliable to measure is if you stick tests at the end of that. Whereas actually the outcomes of education are so much broader.
They might all do quite well in the tests, but they might all hate their subjects.
Or hate school.
Just hate school, yeah.
And hate being there and can't wait to leave.
And the sad thing is, you can see the logic in that. It's easier to say how many of these 100 spellings can these children get right, and you can measure that as an absolute. It's literally black and white. Yeah. Versus, how creative are they then? Yeah. Which doesn't have a structure of marking associated with it. There's not a scale.
Yes. But there are ways. It just is a bit like the way that I teach and I promote teaching. It's harder. Yeah. Is all, but it is possible. It just becomes more qualitative rather than an easy tallying quantitative test, but completely possible.
And once it becomes normal, presumably it just gets easier and easier as well for the teachers.
Yeah, I mean, something like that, the International Baccalaureate, across most of the continent, there isn't this high stakes age 16 GCSE that sorts out where you're going in life. Just when you peak adolescent, really struggling with your executive control, really trying to find out who you are. It's just like all of the experts in teenage cognitive psychology know, don't test them at 16.
It's just a weird thing, isn't it, when we spend so much time going, well, kids are stupid and they don't know what they're doing. God, young boys before the age of 20 odd, don't trust them with anything. Anyway, decide now what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, based on some really bleeding hard end point, closed book exams. Yeah, so International Baccalaureate is like a whole... There's some exams and tests in there, but there's like portfolios of work as well that the kids are responsible to put together. There's presentations they have to do. So you're assessed on a whole kind of range of outcomes. And that, that's across most of Europe, apart from us.
Typical Johnny foreigner taking the easy route, hey? Well, we do it properly. God, tell you.
Leah, you obviously get very good feedback. And I know this because all the teachers that you've worked with sing your praises and, talk about the changes that you've helped to introduce and how well that's impacted their classrooms. But have you had any particular moments personally that have stood out, either with teachers or kids, that have made you kind of just go, yes, it's working?
Yeah, I mean, actually, the teacher things, I do get emails most weeks where teachers are sending me their kids' writing, and I can't believe I tried this and look at keep opening those doors, So teachers, I do get lovely feedback, but hadn't up to COVID been employed in a school then it was probably like 20 years I'd been out by the time it was exactly. It was like 19 years.
So not a lot of interaction with the actual kids, I guess. Yeah.
So that's it. But I suppose with both interventions that I do borrow classes and people observe me teaching, but it's a little bit honeymoon period, isn't it? There.
Yeah.
And I don't then do the every day, 5 days a week, work towards the assessment. I don't have to do all of that.
Oh my God, are you just like the cool uncle that comes in and gives the kid sweets and then just waltzes off home, not having no responsibility? That's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Feeds them all cake. Yeah.
Broccoli, don't need that. So COVID hit and my diary emptied, and I could have taught teachers how to teach in a pandemic, but I somehow thought that would be inauthentic, since actually all of us were just making it up as we didn't.
Yeah, I'm the expert
really
on pandemic teaching.
Yeah. Exactly. So actually, a mate man down the road who taught in the school where my kids both went, Lee, we need someone 3 days a week to do some intervention teaching with the kids who've really got broken through lockdown. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I need. So I did go back in the classroom for that year where we thought the lockdown was over, and then it happened again in the January. But it was, I'm not going to say the pandemic was great, but it was a great experience to go back in the classroom in the middle of a period where it was incredibly difficult to teach. And I had a wave of little year sevens that And they were all actually very quiet, pretty much, in this group. It was quite hard to tease things out of them. And there's a little lad, and he hadn't done very well at secondary, had quite strong dyslexic tendencies in the way that he learnt. But he was, when he did speak, he was, gentle and quiet. And when he did speak, you could see there was a lot of intelligence, going on there. But he thought he was terrible at writing because of his teacher had told him he was no good at English at primary because he couldn't spell and he struggled with punctuation rules and that kind of thing. So, so he had a kind of a bad metacognition about English and himself and him as a writer. And I use this little, do you want me to read you his poem?
Yes.
Oh, yes,
please.
yeah.
So there's a crazy little modernist poem by a poet called Miroslav Holob, so who's originally writing in the Czech. So we read it in translation. Go and open the door. Maybe there'll be, and you go through a series of things. What might you find if you open the door? And some of them are silly, and some of them are funny, and some of them are scary, and some of them are really inviting, and some of them are fantastical, And his ending is wonderfully pathetic. He goes, go and open the door. At least there'll be a draft. It's great. So we had slow revealed this, but we'd paused, and then they had drafted. So imagine you're writing the next stanza, go and open the door. And we went through that. Well, what if it's perhaps there's something exciting, even if there's something, oh God, that's going to be something a little bit scary, isn't it? Or maybe there'll be that's something quite enticing. Yeah, so we played with that, and it kind of, I said, you can put your feelings about coming back to school after COVID or just being out in the world, and here we are still with our masks on and stuff. So this was his poem. Go and open the window. Perhaps it will be unbolted. Throw it wide. Maybe there'll be a dragon. Do what it asks of you, and it will set you free. But if you disobey, the darkness will begin to creep, and he will never let you leave. If the door knocks, do not answer it. Perhaps the ceiling will open. Go through that. If there's a demon, look after it. And if it attacks you, comfort it. If you see the door, open it. Even if you hear a fire, even if the door is disintegrating, open it. At least you will be free.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's good, isn't it?
Just this journey. And he loved Dungeons and Dragons, and you can kind of hear the dragons, the demons, there's all sorts of stuff that he loves coming through. But he's thinking hard about this struggle of not just COVID, but life and choices and struggles and
Wouldn't be massively out of place in the Bible, that, would it?
That's a big allegory, isn't it?
Yeah, nice
absolutely.
parable there.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's very good. I love the demon bit. It's wonderful. It's completely not what you're expecting.
If it attacks you, comfit it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that twist that he takes you on.
Just puts you off balance, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly the kind of thing Jesus would say, isn't it?
Jesus would say that. Good old Jesus.
So that was, me taking the group on a careful little breadcrumb trail through this poem, and they were writing as they were reading. That's our USPs. You don't read a whole thing and then go, now let's write our own. You stop, you pause, you write little bits in between. And so you're like playing with, it's that real creativity. Let's just play with a little bit of putty. Let's just play with a few words. How are they landing? What are we thinking? Swap them with your partner. Let's have,
So even that just gives them so much freedom within it, doesn't it? Rather than it being a rote task, rather than it being a formal thing where you read a poem, then separately analyse it and it becomes dry and boring. It's like you're in the middle of it.
That's it.
Right? You're in the action.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And they feel less scared. This is just a little taster. And then he just went from strength to strength. But there was one thing. We looked at a couple of texts that were shifting into historic present. So it's the past tense narrative, but then you suddenly get thrown in. I think it was Private Peaceful, actually, where the narrator thinks about Tomo, who's his brother, who's gone off towards World War One. And it's like the historic present is even more vivid, even though it's a flashback. It's how memory works, isn't it? Sometimes you just go, memories, and Nathaniel just got this. And then he wrote this piece. He just lost his grandma. And he wrote about Christmases at grandma's. And it's shifted into this historic present. And it was like Dylan Thomas or something, A Child's Christmas in Wales. It wasn't mawkish. It was like really vivid and sincere, and it's how other writers had helped him to find a voice. for what, as you say, John, was kind of already there, but he was finding the language to say that. So he stays with me. Yeah.
That's lovely. It's a shame in a way that doesn't kind of continue into GCSE, into secondary, that you have reading, writing and oracy all in tandem and working together, because they work so brilliantly together, don't they? Because, you know, when you're writing your own stuff, that gives you a real insight into how writers manipulate language or make a point or, you know, make someone laugh or move them or whatever. And I think if you're not writing all the time, it's quite hard. It's actually harder to analyse text because you haven't sort of thought about the meaning in the same way, but they're all constantly working together. And if you can, I don't know, I think in secondary there's this real onus on, you've got to learn these texts inside out. You've got 15 poems, you know, and all these things. So it just feels like so much that actually the teachers don't have time to just kind of luxuriate a bit and enjoy English and maybe bring in some flash fiction and look at a couple of short stories and, you know, do that kind of, like you're saying, that kind of work where you maybe look at a little bit and then you open it out and you say, what would you do here? Or what would your writing look like? And in that way, it's just exciting. You know, you can see how kids get excited about doing that. And it feels like that's very much a primary thing. And we're going to leave that there now and, you know.
I don't know. I think the teachers that I know, the secondary teachers, they'll still teach like that. It's rare. It's perhaps harder to hold on to because it isn't. Again, it's like, is this misnomer? It's partly about efficiency, thinking if we get through the 15 poems, that's what I'm here for and that's what I need to do. Whereas actually, if you teach the first 5 in that let's just look at the first stanza, what's happening here, what's the tone, what's the voice, how's that? Let's write the next stanza. By the time you get to poem 6 and 7, they can read more on their own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And they need you less, and they will take less time. So it's just wrong. It's just cognitively, developmentally wrong to say, all the answers are in me, and I'm the expert in the room, and I've got to tell you what these poems mean and how to read them, and you've got to listen to that and copy me and write these down, and then they'll be there. You're growing a reader. But yeah, that probably isn't 90% of secondary schools.
Yeah.
Perhaps don't do that enough. I hope I'm wrong.
Would that be the thing that you maybe most urgently change? If you were ultimately powerful, which of course you are, Lee, in many ways, if you were super powerful, would that be the thing that you change to kind of turn the subject of English around? It's the methodology, ultimately. Yeah.
And I think it's an art subject is what's been lost. A drama teacher would never dream of going, now we've got to read this whole play and I've got to tell you what it means. So if they're using text-based, they just laugh at you, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Or an art teacher go, it's going to take us 3 weeks to get the paint out because I've got to explain exactly what Monet was doing here.
Yeah.
When you put those correlatives in, you go, it's absolutely nonsensical.
I don't think they don't even do that in other subjects, do they? In science or PE, or you get into the action, you get in and amongst it.
Yeah, and that whole Vygotsky, once you start talking and I hear what your understanding is aloud, then I can work with it. But I can't work with it while it's stuck in your head and you're being silent. You've got to share that out loud. So we've got to have that dialogue about what you think is going on here. And that's what I work with to change it. And then it's even better if you get them writing within that process. So you've got all those language modes and what. Yeah, so I think it's that. Let's go back to it's a creative arts subject, not a vehicle for grammar and accuracy. And then if I'm all powerful, I'll admit, that, Tommy, your question of like what are the barriers is that's going to take some careful professional development to grow teachers who feel confident to teach in that way, to read deeply and think aloud about text and bring kids alongside them as we're all writing and playing with this like a great art teacher or a great drama teacher would. So, ultimately, it would be slim the curriculum content a bit. Actually, the signs are where Bridget Phillipson wants to lead the new education department. And I would extend initial teacher education. It's too short. Or at least make sure teachers get sabbaticals where, they can step out and go deeper and learn.
Right, yeah.
But the idea that you're like a finished teacher after a year and now survive and learn it all on the job when you're knackered. Yeah, so I think it's those threats.
Well, we sold it then. That's brilliant. All sorted. Thank you so much, Leah.
Yeah, thank you.
That was great. It was very inspiring. You do talk wonderfully about it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I found that very inspiring, Tom. Probably should have talked to Leah earlier. Might have actually got my kids to like English.
Yeah, you maybe missed a trick there, but no, I agree. I'd love that idea that teachers maybe don't just stand at the front and shovel information at the class, but instead the teacher is a facilitator for you to actually have your own thoughts and bring them to life. Imagine that. I think that's it's exciting. No, but it's exciting getting back to that as kind of like inspiring kids.
It is, and do you know what, Tom? It's made me hungry for some more now.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a lot to take in from that chat, isn't there?
There is.
So, you know what we're going to do? We're going to wrap up this episode here.
All right.
And we'll be back with a bunch of chats with teachers and kids who've been putting some of the things Leah was talking about into actual real-life action.
Yes, the proof of the pudding and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all right talking about these big ideas and getting all excited about them, but before we start putting all this stuff into our world-changing letter to the Right Honourable Bridget Phillipson, we should probably check that we're actually on the right track.
Oh, come on. I'm pretty sure. We are now, Tommy, think about it. We're now the saviours of English literacy.
That is true.
So we are undoubtedly on the right track.
That is very true. So join us next time out when we'll be talking to those teachers and pupils and finishing our open letter to the new Secretary of Education.
Yes, and some of the stuff the kids have written that we get to hear, that alone is worth tuning in for.
Oh, yeah. Really, really good stuff. Really good stuff.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll catch you in part 2.
Thank you very much for listening. Tell you what, John, I'm glad we got to the end of that without you doing one of your silly songs, because I don't think that would be appropriate, would it, having a serious letter to a cabinet minister and then you doing...
I don't know, Tom. I don't think creativity should be confined by, convention or rules or good judgment. Do you know what I mean?
I know where this is going.
I think we should be free to explore the confines of our minds. I mean, that's what this is all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is why I've written this little ditty, which I will now perform in the style of my old RE teacher, who could sort of sing and play the piano.
God.
Why should we be fettered by ridiculous rules for schools that stick to old curriculums? We can do great things if we spread our wings. Let our children fly, be less meticulous. Writing helps you see through others' eyes. Reading is the same, and that is why English should be fun, too important not to come right at the top of Bridget Phillipson's pile.
Well, that was something, wasn't it?
Music with a message.